The trial by combat in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms landed with a splash. I've been fencing historically for over 10 years, sometimes in armor, so let's take a look at it through that lens. Spoilers, of course, for episode 5. One of the things I like here is that Dunk is pretty poorly equipped by the standards of any of the other knights on this field. He is a hedge knight after all. There's a whole scene about him trying to just fund his armor any way he can, which is actually going to bite him in the butt real soon. Of course, we have this draconic, grotesque armor here. It is sufficiently flamboyant, I think, to match the ego of its wearer. And he's off. And he's hit. Right into the mail. I would not want to have to take a lance hit like that against just mail. It is excellent for stopping cuts and stuff, but it doesn't have a whole lot of structure of itself, and you're putting a lot of weight behind a lance blow. Now, as useless as this makes the mail look, I believe it actually still saves his life here. When they're triaging his wounds later, the blacksmith notes that the mail had been pushed into the wound. So while I believe there was an amount of penetration, the mail overall held off enough to prevent the lance from going fully through. It just kind of punched in past the mail a little bit, and then it was decelerated before it could get too much deeper. He still took a really nasty hit, but the mail held up well enough to prevent it from running him all the way through. I appreciate that we keep getting these in-helmet views to really sell how claustrophobic wearing these things can be. Here we get a great sequence of showing how prioritizing your helmet can really save your butt. He might be wearing mail everywhere else, but he's about to take some repeated blows to that helmet, and it's going to hold up against every single one of these things that are happening. He's still getting banged around horribly, but he's alive. That's the important part. He's alive. I love this next shot showing if you've got a long spear that outranges the guy on the horse and you can plant it, you're sending him off the horse. I like the touch here that Dunk manages to actually get in underneath the swing of the flail and then take it to the ground where he's got a more even fight, currently unarmed as he is. I love the thought of the prop guy just throwing a lance onto these two. And now that he's got this reversal, Dunk is in a weight class all his own, and he completely starts to overpower Arian here. But this isn't just a wrestling contest. Arian's armed, and he puts that dagger to good use to try to reverse the situation. Now, I'm not sure this blade profile would actually have much luck against mail, but giving them the benefit of the doubt from a prop and actor safety perspective, let's assume it can do some damage against mail, then it has definitely broken its way through some of these links, but it looks like enough of the mail is holding that it is not allowing it to penetrate further, much like the lance earlier. So it's hurting him, but I'm going to put this up to another point for the mail. Now that he's reversed it, he can start to go for a more lethal target. This is also something that comes up in some of the fencing manuals, where you might not be able to get to the really vital target, but you're able to soften them up by attacking other places that they're going to have a harder time to defend until you can open them up for something more fight ending. In this case, Arian's doing everything he can to get into a position of dominance so that he can employ the dagger to Dunk's face, but Dunk sacrifices his hand to make that block. I know I've read at least one account of a duel where someone does make a desperate play to block with their hand, and they essentially get bisected. I will include that in the description if I can pull that up after the fact. Up next is my favorite move in the whole fight, this gorgeous beat into a cover, including a grapple. This is something that I actually personally like to use when I'm fencing. If I'm trying to make a grapple happen, it is one of my favorite ways to close the distance. I appreciate that Arian's able to reverse this with a quick shield bash, followed by Dunk just open hand slapping him across the face, demonstrating just how much of a behemoth this man is. I don't think we were expecting Arian to be all that hurt by that through the helmet, but the main thing is that he came colliding in with enough force that he was able to essentially disrupt his balance and tip him over, so that's the more important thing that happened there. Right here is definitely where they started to put in the work with the choreo. Let's break this particular exchange down step by step. This opening move here is probably the most martially dubious of anything that happens in this whole battle. Now, if you're going to do a spin like this, I do at least like how he kind of sets this up by at least clearing the space with his shield first to buy himself the time to make that attack, but the cut itself is pretty dubious to me. Mostly because in order to perform this cut, he has thrown his arm all the way back behind himself at maximum extension, where there is no more movement it can possibly make through the target. This is a purely percussive snap with the blade. There is no way this could continue on to actually make a meaningful cut through the target. It is just a shot out popping through. But at the same time, it's still going to hurt when it hits, and that could very well be all he's trying to do here is just cause another pain on top of all the other ones that Dunk has suffered, so he can continue to work to more valuable targets. These next two movements are really slick. We've got an opening cut across that he flows into a false edge cut that I believe he transforms into a thrust against the mail, causing Dunk additional suffering. He gets one more harassing cut across the back, doesn't really do much, but then Dunk gets this lovely hand parry against the thrust as it's coming in. And then Dunk just starts absolutely laying into him. No grace, no skill, just raw power. And then Arian reverses it and comes back in with some more of those gorgeous false edge and long edge alternations and just starts hammering in thrusts where he can get them. It's really pretty. Arian goes for a sword throw here, which you think I might take some issue with, but it's a calculated risk. Yes, he's throwing away his weapon, and at this point, I don't think he has the dagger either, but it can potentially give him the distraction he needs to get in close, which it does. It was a gamble to throw it, but his bet paid off. I appreciate that once he gets it back, he doesn't just immediately reclaim the handle. In the moment, it can be difficult to do that. If you've done grappling with swords, you kind of have to just play it from where the sword ends up. You don't always have the choice to shift your grip in the moment. And of course, a crossguard makes for a lovely improvised warhammer, and he drives it in for Dunk's visor here in a meme-worthy Mordschlag. Fortunately for Dunk, it mostly catches on his ocular here and not his actual eye, but it does definitely still get in far enough to cause him some real pain. The next blow Dunk lands is what really locks in his ability to actually win this fight in the end. He hasn't made any significant injuries to Arian until this point. A timing detail I appreciate here is that Arian getting knocked back and staggered into this torch here is what delays him from making his counterattack to the head, and Dunk is able to close in with his own before that blow lands to his head. And of course, turning your sword around for that haymaker is just always cool. And again, just an absolutely terrible place to get hit. It is a difficult place on the body to armor, and it is incredibly important to our ability to move, fight, and I'm sure Arian's dignity as well. I appreciate that while Arian is definitely gassed and hurt, he still has a good enough sense of measure to where he is able to completely just void that swing. This next part right here is probably my favorite example of the armor doing its job. Arian goes for an overhead chop to the head, but it misses and hits Dunk's gorget, doing absolutely nothing, providing Dunk the opportunity to take his sword into half sword, clamp it over Arian's sword, and then take that fight to the ground. At this point, Arian just doesn't have any fight left, and it's just a pummeling. Congratulations, Dunk, you win, provided you don't die of infection. Best of luck.